Of images from previous work, and I've always really been interested in buildings and built environment and buildings and how they sit within in nature and natural environment. So this is an example of a drawing, and also painting oil on canvas. I live in Australia. I live in Queensland on the coast, and a lot of issues that I try to show in my work about living in sort of urban environments or people living in units and apartment blocks. Directly before I came to Hanoi, I spent a few months in the Kimberley in northwest Australia. Probably the most different you could get to Hanoi. I lived in an Aboriginal community working with in an Aboriginal art centre, a community of about 800 people, and the nearest town was something 300 kilometres away. So it was quite a change to come from living in that kind of a community to Hanoi, and I love living in both for very different reasons. It gives you an understanding of the isolation of the place, and somehow I think I'll spend some more time in those sort of communities. But from that time, I got the call to come to Hanoi after visiting quite a few times over a period of about 7 or 8 years and living with friends. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been here about 18 months, and these are some of the first sort of studies, and I call them studies because very few of my works at the moment I feel are sort of resolved and finished, and but still sticking with the idea of buildings and experimenting with that concept of how buildings and how they fit with the environment around them, and playing around with those two things.
Buildings.
Some of the earlier things, obviously you can see sort of the buildings and area, and I live near Te Ho, so the idea of buildings and water and those dramatic sunsets we have here through those murky skies, and the idea of fish, and of course still sticking with the idea of buildings and how a lot of buildings we have here are living sculptures. And to me, I just love they're almost, purpose-built installations. And we walk around Hanoi looking at some of these structures, and they've got a life of their own to me. And I really don't do anything, just take a photo, and to me they're wonderful as they are. But of course, I use that as starting points to experiment and try a few things. And I will show shortly some of the experiments, and I repeat, most of these are just sort of working artworks. They're not resolved or finished at this stage, but you'll probably see, I purposefully put in the images of the photographs of the buildings to try to show you how I personally use that as inspiration. Of course, still playing around with three-dimensional works, and this is just playing with bamboo and plaster bandage, and as an artist, artists have to make a decision about how much they want to represent something or how much they want to be inspired by something, and even playing around with, as most people, it's easy to have yourself as a model, so doing self-portraits, but there's the whole point of fitting in with the idea of buildings and construction, and so are sort of those the high-rise towers and the construction towers, and also playing around with this is an example of a painting that's been manipulated digitally as well. So once again, they're all just working and playing around with ideas of and combining media without real aim. As I said earlier, it's most of these images haven't been changed. I just sort of crop sections, and to me they're art in themselves. And I really don't need to do much with that. But sometimes it's just nice to look at these images of things and their paintings in themselves. So it's interesting to see how, looking at these structures and these buildings and these forms and these colours and these lines and these wires, how wire. And so I keep coming back to, there's no shortage of tarpaulin and coverages, and how it's almost as if it's some, set in a play, and all the streets of Hanoi are part of some big stage. And just experimenting at the moment, as the last few slides, getting into a little bit of printmaking, and this is a lino piece that's sort of just been hand-coloured. Nothing too complicated, but it's sort of almost a process of thinking through ideas in a traditional way. It's still lino prints, but using images of, once again, wires. and how, with lino you need to simplify things and break it into simple forms. Thank you.